Hello everybody, it is your deadline stream here on the Premier Injuries channel, and we've already got a load of questions, Ben. I'm sure you're itching and ready to answer them. Yeah, you're looking in a good mood today, to be fair, mate. Just before we get on to asking how you're doing, the usual questions on your fitness and health, just to remind people that if you don't have some of your questions answered today, or if you do have any questions in general, you can always head over to the Premier Injuries website, which I've got up right now. All the teams are done alphabetically through from Bournemouth down to Wolves, so no need to worry in terms of that. And then if you still don't have your question answered, you can always tweet me or Ben, or you can always comment on the video below. But we're going to be going through the expected lineups today. Ben doing his usual great work on this. And once again, we're going to go through the teams alphabetically so that there's no confusion and everything. So if your team hasn't been kind of answered just yet, if your question hasn't been answered just yet, we will probably get to it. And if not, give us a prompt. But yeah, Ben, you're looking in good spirits today. Hopefully not too overworked. How are you doing?
Overworked, burnt out. How many times do I say it? I think we've had 12 or 13 press conferences within the last hour to hour and a half. It's been absolutely manic. So that's why you'll see my eyes flicking from left to right as quotes are still coming up with. The Aston Villa Unai Emery quotes went live around about 3 minutes ago. And I'm still trying to decipher everything else that's come through at the same time. So, yeah, look, you got to laugh, otherwise I'd cry.
I mean, will you laugh or cry at my joke? I'd say, Ben, why are you doing that, mate? There you go. So that's a cry one. That's so just before we get into it, we've got Jovan, lovely to see you, Slavcho as well. John Dre, he said he's got a cold one in hand, ready to go. This is becoming a habit. Yeah, we're always here every week for you, and GV as well. We've got a question on Patterson and Stones. Like I said, we are going to try and get in there. And there's already a request, Ben, for Dinnery Jr. should stand in somewhere. Is Dinnery Jr. about today?
Back to school, thankfully. It is half term next week, so who knows? But for today, he's well out of the way, which is a blessing.
There you go. So maybe next week, people, there could be a surprise Dinnery Jr. appearance, or both of them, because you've got two Dinnery Juniors. Let's go on to, though, Bournemouth. We're going to start with the team lineups. Just one more time, I'll put it in the comments as well. We're going to go through this alphabetically. So we're not ignoring some of your questions. Just try and do it, when we're talking about Bournemouth, send in Bournemouth questions. But yeah, Bournemouth, what is the latest on them?
Yeah, we had a couple of absentees. There actually was 5 changes last week from Gary O'Neill. The majority of those were enforced. A couple of injuries, certainly within that back line. Lloyd being one of those, and also Jack Stevens, 2 calf injuries. Now, Gary O'Neill is one of those press conferences that is just happening. He's keeping his cards very close to his chest, not revealing much with regards to that team news. So that's why we've stuck with Chris Messam and Senesi. It wasn't a bad performance last weekend, maybe a little bit unlucky. A couple of their new signings, particularly Ouattara. I think I actually pronounced that one quite well. Ouattara looks very sharp, looks a threat. The Cherries need to start winning. So, I'm just trying to read this like Semieno. So that's bad, that one. Semenyo. Yo.
Yes.
I have him leading the line, but Dominic the Solanke isn't too far away. Both him and Marcus Tavernier, they trained ahead of last weekend's game, but Gary O'Neill made that late call and decided not to involve them. So, barring any kind of reaction or setback on the training pitches, those 2 players should force their way into contention, certainly into the matchday squad. Tavernier would be more of a concern. He's had quite a bit of time out due to that hamstring problem. Solanke, not so bad. I think it's around 2 to 3 weeks with that knee issue. So he is one that could potentially force his way into the starting 11. He hasn't lost too much sharpness.
And, in terms of fixtures for Game Week 23, I'm sure you're quite excited with all those things that you've described, the negatives about Bournemouth, it's a positive for your boys Newcastle, who we will get on into a minute. But let's start with Arsenal in terms of the double game week teams. So many people are worried about who's the best three, who should you have in your team. And I think, in terms of it, you've written about it in the 888 article this week. Arsenal, first of all, they're looking in good form, but the second thing is their team is much easier to predict than Man City's. There's a lot of things going on at Man City, on and off the pitch. It looks a bit disruptive. So, yeah, are you pretty settled on this starting 11 then?
The worry is, if you look at those double game week fixtures, obviously the Manchester City one is the game that they love to win. And you probably think, the game at the Emirates first time around, that's probably one where, they'll want to get off to a good start, and maybe Mikel Arteta could afford to change things up. So that's only my slight concern. And because of that, you've got the likes of at right back, you've got Tomiyasu, you've got Kieran Tierney at left back. You've also got Jorginho, who could come in for Thomas Partey. We know he took that bang to the ribs, I think it was in the FA Cup, and wasn't quite 100% last weekend. So there are changes that could be made. The reason I'm tending to stick with the same 11, we've heard Mikel Arteta talk about it before. If you want to play at the highest level, if you want to perform optimally week in, week out, you need to get used to playing a high number of games. So that's why we went with that. And my feeling is, he'll go strong, and then hopefully, the result is going their way, and he'll make changes maybe after that 60-minute mark. Time will tell. So that's my only sort of slight concern at this point.
And this nicely leads on to one of the questions from GV. He said, expected minutes of Martinelli. Is he going to play both? Is he going to play over that 60-minute mark to at least get, double in terms of appearance points? And Jandre has said as well, everybody's worried about Martinelli. I think Trossard can take minutes off anyone in the front three. So does that kind of go against the worry that Martinelli's the one to be picked? Or do you think that, he is the main one that is going to be, taken off?
Look, there's so many influencing factors when it comes to, when you're trying to maybe gauge expected minutes of players, and that may come down to the result. It may come down to how the player's feeling, if they pick up a knock, if Mikel Arteta interprets something, the setup of Thomas Frank in Brentford, so there are a lot of different anomalies, uncontrollables in there. But yes, I had this discussion yesterday with regards to Martinelli. I certainly see the introduction of Trossard into that Arsenal squad as a threat to his potential minutes. Emile Smith Rowe is another one. Unfortunately, we don't have to worry about it this week, but going forward, he is somebody else who could be deployed on that left-hand side. But like I say, Martinelli does start, in my opinion. Mikel Arteta has been, fairly true to his word. He's stuck with a pretty, solid 11 for the most part this season, which is, again, why we've went with this lineup.
Yeah, and I think, looking at Saka, I don't think he's going to be rested. He's talismanic. He does a lot for the team. And also, if Jorginho is not on the pitch, then he's taking penalties. He's taking the some of the set pieces as well. I think Martinelli, especially since Jesus' injury. Before then, he was in fantastic form. He's the one that suffered most. That kind of left-hand side creation, and he's been kind of a little bit left out. And Nketiah and Saka almost seem undroppable at the moment, and so I wouldn't be too worried about them. But yeah, in terms of it as well, then, do you think that the worries about rotation in the team, it's maybe overplayed, and that Arteta is going to play the best team for both games because the Premier League is the main target?
I'm more concerned about restricted minutes. I think, again, if Mikel Arteta stays true to his word, they're in a position where really, they're playing, week to week for the most part. So they've got full recovery, optimum recovery levels. He doesn't need to change things too much, like I say, unless there are suspensions or knocks and niggles along the way. So I suspect, like I say, he will go pretty strong. And then hopefully for the Gunners, the result is going in the right direction, and Mikel Arteta can make his changes. There's 5 substitutes there. There's a lot of, there's some decent strength and depth on that bench. So, he does have the flexibility and the leeway to be able to change things up and freshen some legs.
And as well, what is your predictions for the result then? Because I think we're almost kind of assuming that Man City and Arsenal are going to win both of those first games, Brentford and Aston Villa, respectively. So what is going to be the score, or where do you see the result going?
I'll have to be very careful what I say here, Jason, won't I? Since you're a gooner.
Oh, I don't mind.
You know what, Manchester City, backs against the walls. How many times have we spoken about it before? Off the back of last weekend's result, terrible. I don't think Pep can really afford to mess on with his lineup too much these days. He cannot be tinkering. He needs to go strong from now until the end of the season, really, if he has any chance or any hope of being able to win back-to-back Premier League titles. Do you know what? I'll tell you what, I'll sit on the fence with the draw, but if anybody was going to win it, I'll say Manchester City.
Yeah, this is my worry. Is obviously we played well this season. I think years and years of just Arsenal letting me down. Just when I start to believe, I temper any sort of beliefs and hope and stuff, which I guess is a good life lesson, isn't it, really? But in terms of it, Man City, they're predicted to win. So if you look at 538, a fantastic kind of predictive model, they've got Man City to win 40%, Arsenal to win 36%, and then if you go over to the general kind of betting things, it's about 41% for Man City to win and Arsenal 36%. So it's close. It's not, kind of years gone by where it was probably, 50-60% Man City. And I think the fact that it is at home makes a big difference as well. And I've put it in the comments as well for people to vote on it. So when we get to Man City, I'll reveal who is going to win in people's opinions. But one of the people that Man City are playing this game week, as well as Arsenal, is Aston Villa. What is the injury situation there?
Yeah, we've seen the return of John McGinn to the matchday squad last weekend. Wasn't quite fit enough to push for a start following that hamstring problem. But we've seen Unai Emery make changes early in that game, a couple of changes at half-time. So I'm bringing John McGinn in for Ramsey on the right-hand side. And also at left-back, a little bit of a gamble here because he did start with Lucas Digne, but that shoulder problem, hampered his training in the build-up to that game. But Marino is, he's an exciting attacking fullback. And he gets my nod.
I do want to bring it back actually to Arsenal. Sorry if people think we're spending a lot of time there, but I think, it's the double game week, so a lot of people are asking. Alex King asked, return to play for Jesus.
Yeah, we're talking about initially, although Mikel Arteta kept his cards very close to his chest. Timeline was around about 3 months, but ish. With such long-term injuries, it's hard to give any kind of definitive guideline that could easily extend beyond that. Let's not get too carried away from the fact that he's been pictured on the training pitches. Only returned to London Colney this week, certainly not with the group, just doing little bits. If all being well, and he progresses without any kind of reaction. And of course, that's what we don't know. They're the unknowns at this moment. And Mikel Arteta spoke about it. We need to put that knee under stress. We need to increase load. We need to put some actions into that knee where it doesn't feel as secure and as stable as it has been, and see what kind of response we do from that. Comes through all of that, then, I think around about the beginning of March, the sort of late February at very, very best is realistic.
And I think as well, in terms of people looking at the FPL teams, then people are worried, Nketiah, he might be out of the team soon. But again, it's kind of with the Callum Wilson situation. Once he's out of the team, you can transfer him out. But for now, he's a fantastic own. Lots of XGI per 90. Just absolutely brilliant. 0.8 XGI per 90, in fact. Back to Aston Villa. You've covered the injury situation. I think on the surface, looking at it, they might be experiencing a new manager bounce, because looking at their underlying data, they've not improved all that much, and they're actually in the bottom 4 for XG conceded. since game week 17, that restart, and obviously Unai Emery was brought in during that kind of World Cup period to change up the team. So we shall see, but that could be down to some of the injuries as well. But let's move to Brentford. What is the injury latest there, Ben?
Yeah, not much to really report from Thomas Frank. There's a couple of players who are nearing a return, but with regards to that, pushing for a starting 11 involvement, I don't really see much change, to be honest. We have seen this formational change between 4-3-3, this 3-5-2 setup here. I had been dropped out in recent times. Wiss has been in and out. Aaron Hickey was a player that's returned to the side following that long-term ankle ligament problem. There's also a couple of positions maybe up for debate in midfield. Baptiste, he's back in on the training pitches, and also Janel. But this is a team I'm going with. Rico Henry came off with a slight, he had a slight muscle issue last weekend, but they understand that was just cramp, and it shouldn't be anything too serious.
And it's kind of interesting it's gone quiet with the Ivan Toney situation. Nothing's been heard since that big discussion in January. So again, it's kind of like when people were discussing about Nketiah, should we have him in our teams or not? Just keep him in your team till we hear any sort of decisions on those matters. So let's have a look at Brighton, and we do have a question about Brighton in a second, but looking at the team, it seems to be, the best 11 once again. They're looking good at the moment, Brighton, one of the best teams really for a long while. Good attack, good defence, and Mitoma is looking absolutely brilliant, isn't he, Ben? He was one of your picks for this game week in terms of who to buy.
Yeah. Look, him and Marsh have been absolutely fantastic. Solly Marsh, the pair of them have been great since the restart. Mitoma never really got much of a look in under Graham Potter, but under Roberto De Zerba, has really sort of earned his place, and he looks a fantastic buy. Elsewhere within this Brighton team, almost Roberto De Zerba's challenged that inner Marcelo Bielsa by name dropping a few players who will come in to that starting 11. We heard from Tariq Lamptey was last week, and there will be an update on this team news because we do know that Joel Veltman will also start. So he's probably going to come in at centre-back alongside Lewis Dunk, which means Van Heck will drop out. Elsewhere, McAllister is also a starter. He missed out last weekend due to suspension. He picked up his 5th caution of the campaign prior to that. And then there's also question marks on whether Moises Caicedo would return. He was on the bench last week. That wasn't related necessarily or directly to that interference from the likes of Arsenal potentially making a deadline day move. Roberto De Zerba said it was more due to the fact that he missed time on the training pitches, and that's why he was on the bench.
And just a shout out to one of our friends, Gianni Buttici. He's got a great video on Mitoma in terms of analysis, but also the really cool story of how he got to Brighton as well. Don't know if he's listening today. He was last week. So shout out to Gianni. Subscribe to his channel. It's really good stuff over there. But Chelsea are the ones up next. And frankly, I'm still not very impressed with the team. I don't know how they're going to get balance in there. They've got so many people for so few 11 positions on the pitch. And it must be really difficult for you to pick an 11 as well, because I don't think Graham Potter knows. I don't think the players know. I don't think anybody knows who is the quote-unquote best 11.
Yeah, I did struggle, I must admit. There's a lot of names to try and squeeze into that starting 11. I've went with this. I'm pretty confident, or at least hopeful, that I've maybe got 8 or 9 of them correct. Maybe the Chabaloa one is up for the debate. Cucurella, I would hope. I don't think Ben Chilwell is quite there, although he came off the bench last weekend. I'd certainly put Chilwell ahead of Lewis, maybe, who has played on that left-hand side. Obviously, Conor Gallagher's dropped out of that. But João Felix straight back in. He picked up a red card on his debut against Fulham, and he served his 3-match ban. With regards to the team news, Kovacic training still out. Too soon for Wesley Fofana, and also Raheem Sterling. He returned from a hamstring problem last week, but he's picked up a knock in training and faces a late fitness test.
So in terms of it then, we've got a question. João Felix, is he going to start every week? Is that tactical or is it monetary reasons that he'll start as well?
Look, and quality, by the way. Very impressive on his debut. We don't quite know how he's going to settle into the Premier League in terms of its intensity, in terms of the physicality. But I certainly think for now, I think Graham Potter's been very impressed. Apparently stuck a really good relationship with João Felix. So, those early signs are good. And I do see him as part of that Chelsea starting 11. Maybe he's just got that little bit of guile and craft to be able to unlock doors, and hopefully, Kai Havertz, unfortunately, I am an owner. He can start putting some of those chances away, because it's rather frustrating watching from afar.
And we do have a question on Enzo Fernandez as well. Just in terms of it, it's kind of the question of, I guess, the Kante position, isn't it? I think that's where the big problem has been for Chelsea, replacing Kante, filling that gap in the team. And we shall see, basically, because he's only played 70 odd games for Benfica. It's not a lot of games, and it's not in like Europe's top 5 leagues either. Portugal is a fairly good league, but it's not one of the ones that you kind of shine in. But I guess Chelsea have kind of looked at it. But he does a lot of good things. He facilitates a lot of these things, and I guess he does quite a bit of different work to Kovacic as well. So he does play that kind of more traditional 6 role. He does a lot of tackles won. He's in the top 1% of Europe top 5 leagues for a lot of his defensive data. So I guess it's kind of a wait and see with him. He could be the answer to a lot of their problems. But I think, and you might agree with this as well, Ben, is, Chelsea's defence is already quite good. It's I guess the goal scorer, because I'm not impressed with Havertz. Aubameyang, not so much. And, the people that they brought in, are they goal scorers as well? I think that's where they've almost been lacking. That they brought in Lukaku to kind of solve it. The last kind of great out-and-out striker that they had was Diego Costa all that time ago.
Or Drogba. I would even maybe go back a little bit further to Drogba. Yeah, it certainly seems as if it's the final piece of the jigsaw that's missing, and maybe a surprise given the amount of money that the new owners have spent since coming in, that a striker didn't top that list. But we know how difficult it is, to pick up these premium players, certainly during the January window. I'm not Kai Havertz, I do quite like him. I just don't like him in that number 9 role. I think he plays much better, a little bit deeper. That's why, we may see João Felix, up alongside him to maybe try and shoulder some of that burden. And it's a confidence issue as well. He'll be feeling that pressure. So, like I say, I've got fires to fight elsewhere. Kai Havertz has to stay in my team this week. So it's fingers crossed he gets at least a brace. At least converts 1 or 2 of the chances that he's getting.
He's not done too bad in terms of since the World Cup restart. I think he's outperformed the likes of Callum Wilson and Ivan Toney. So if you're going for that price bracket, I think only kind of Nketiah has done better. But let's turn our attention to Crystal Palace. It's the derby game this weekend. We've already talked about their opponents, Brighton. But is there any injury boosts or any injury knocks that are going to be adding or taking away from the team? I think the big one is obviously Will Zaha.
We're not expecting Wilfried Zaha to return. I think initial timeline was around about 4 weeks, potentially a little bit longer than that. But Wilf is a very quick healer, so like I say, maybe on the shorter end of that timeline. In terms of a boost, James McArthur, he's going to make his long-awaited return to the squad. Patrick Vieira confirms that he will be involved this weekend, so that's great news with regards to that. Also, Nathan Ferguson has been training without any setbacks with the team for the last couple of months. A lot of quotes embargoed from Patrick Vieira today, so they won't be out until after 10:30. So if you're looking for something maybe on Joachim Anderson or Joel Ward, then that's when you'll be able to find it.
Interesting. And again, head over to the Premier Injuries website or Ben's Twitter for that information. And just, quickly before we move on to Everton, I think it's really interesting that maybe the first time in many seasons that this game is Brighton are the heavy favourites to win. Years gone by, Crystal Palace were kind of safe-ish team. Brighton were fighting the relegation. Now they're 52% prediction for Brighton to win that game. But Everton, seriously impressive against Arsenal. I underestimated the Sean Dyche effect. I'm sure many other people did as well. But going forward, I like a lot of their assets. I love Sean Dyche. I think he's one of the most underrated managers. But the question always is injuries. Is that going to disrupt or help the Dyche cause?
Drum roll. It didn't have to wait very long, but Dominic Calvert-Lewin is touch and go for the Merseyside derby. I say touch and go at best, Sean Dyche said. So it was a hamstring issue that he came off with against Arsenal. With some players, you may want to take that risk, but given the players' injury history over the last 18 months, if the slightest worry or concern with him, then you keep him out of that lineup, which is why I have Neil Maupay up there. He could, of course, maybe go with Demarai Gray, who has played in that attacking role. He wasn't feeling 100% in terms of a slight illness last weekend. That's why he was out of that starting 11. But elsewhere, following that result, then, I think justifiably, it pretty much picks itself.
We should do a video of Sean Dyche's touch and goes. There's probably as many touch and goes, I don't know, per season, 2 or 3 per 90. Some data like that. I don't know. We got a cheeky question there from Giandre. He said, "Are you sure there's 11 men in that formation?" Don't worry, I counted, Ben. There is 11. But it does look like a pretty packed midfield. But it did the job. And I don't know about you, Ben. I fancy Everton in this one. What do you feel?
Again, you're looking at potential. You're looking at players who, if they were to perform anywhere near, optimum levels, and you're thinking the likes of, the Sahas and the Trent Alexander-Arnolds, then it could only be one result. But, how many times have Liverpool disappointed this season, looked like a side in total disarray? I think they're missing, massively a leader at the back in Virgil van Dijk. Joel Matip and Joe Gomez just can't really cut it. Matip's been below par. In midfield, especially if confirmed, and we know he hasn't trained, Thiago Alcantara is a serious doubt. So he'll be a massive miss. He's been, one of the players that's really sort of dragged Liverpool through games on occasions. So there might be a slight sort of reshuffle in that midfield. The Reds are potentially boosted by Diego Jota, but certainly he's only got a handful of training sessions under his belt, so he isn't going to be anywhere near to pushing for a start.
And the thing is, as well, is it's the midfield that's the issue for Liverpool, and the midfield for Everton, to be fair to them, is pretty good. Onana was absolutely immense. Doucouré has always been a fantastic performer in the Premier League, and Dyche got the best out of Gay. The Idrissa Gay from yesteryear that was dominant in the Premier League. Up there with the likes of Ndidi, and Kante is one of the best defensive midfielders. So we'll see. Maybe Dyche has got this licked, and I really like Tarkowski. I'm not looking at the likes of Maupay or Iwobi or McNeil or any of their attacking players, but I like the defensive options going forward from the team. Let's continue though, and Fulham are up next. What is the latest there?
Yeah, there will be one change to this lineup. Marco Silva made 9 changes in the FA Cup at Sunderland. A couple of players picked up knocks. Harrison Reed twisted his knee in that game at the Stadium of Light. And also Tom Kearney in his man of the match performance picked up a heavy knock late on. Now, it was understood at the time on Thursday that Tom Kearney would probably be okay, not as severe as first thought, and Harrison Reed was the big question dog. Of course, I've put this predicted lineup out, and there is a change in there. Kearney will miss out, and Reed is expected to start. So it's pretty much as you were. Expect the Cottagers to revert back to a very similar starting lineup, which we've had, for a lot of time this season. The only rule rotation around congested periods is around Tyson and Diop at the back. Tyson started against Sunderland, so there we go with Diop.
I'm just going to bring it back to Everton because we've got a few questions coming in on Patterson and a few started the stream as well. With Patterson, then, he has looked good. He's a nice cheap asset, but do you think that the fact that Dyche is the type of manager who, once he's chosen his team, it's very hard for kind of ousting people out? Is it kind of Coleman's place to lose at the moment, and so people shouldn't have Patterson in their teams?
Look, I think if you earn the shirt, if the Toffees keep on pulling results out like they did against Arsenal last weekend, then, and keeping clean sheets, what are you going to do? I think, it becomes then very difficult for Sean Dyche to justifiably bring somebody back in like Nathan Patterson. It's almost a clean slate under the new boss. Patterson, yes, was great, but he will lack, that match fitness, that sharpness. Coleman's doing a really good job. So, like I say, there's a lot of factors to consider. It's not just a case of, throwing Patterson straight back in there on the strength of what he done maybe under Frank Lampard. This is about the here and now. And, you don't want to be messing with a winning formula too much if the Toffees can go on a little run.
And because a lot of people have said, Everton, double game week 25, great to own Patterson for Den. But do you think it's a bit of a risk? I'd look at the likes of Tarkowski, 4.2, only 0.3 more, and guaranteed to start.
Well, look, even if Nathan Patterson is fully fit and considered, or certainly pushing for a place in that starting 11, there's always that little bit of a rotation risk or the possibility of limited or restricted minutes because of that, with Seamus Coleman vying for that place on the right back. So, look, yeah, I think I'd prefer to maybe move a little bit, inside, more centrally. On the opposite flank, Mykolenko, he's probably nailed down more in terms of, there's less competition for that left back spot.
Yeah, Mykolenko looks a good asset as well. Leeds are up next. Bamford had a fairly good double game week. He got in the goal involvements. And Notto is just continuing his absolutely brilliant form. He looks so good. But is there any kind of injury boosts for the Leeds team for their big game against Manchester United?
Well, we've certainly, I wouldn't say boost. There's a couple of late decisions pending. And we see Lewis Sinisterra. He came off early doors at Old Trafford. I understand that's a slight muscle issue, so he does have a chance for the game at the weekend, but I don't have him starting. I've got Somerville to come in, like I say. So Sinisterra's coming off the back of that fairly long-term foot problem, a Liz Frank injury. So we don't maybe want to risk him again in quick succession. Mark Roca is another one, and also Liam Cooper. I don't necessarily see the Roca one as being an influence in the lineup too much, but if Liam Cooper is, then there's a question maybe over whether Vuba could potentially move to left back in place of Firpo, with Cooper in alongside Robin Koch. I have Firpo at left back because Pascal Struijk is ruled out as he's undergoing, or certainly going through, the concussion protocols following his withdrawal against Manchester United.
And I'll be interested to see who the new manager is at Leeds as well, because I think they brought in quite a few interesting, exciting players. I think the squad has got an ability within there with some good individuals. And I think sometimes the tactics of Marsh actually constrain the team. At times they're a bit too narrow. They're a bit too predictable with their play. They were kind of playing a poorer version of the Liverpool Gegenpress. And they needed more of that width. So we'll see if a new manager can change things up. Leicester though, are up next. I'm still not sure about Brendan Rodgers, talking about managers. But they had a bit of a turnaround, 4-2 against Aston Villa. What is the latest on their injury front, though?
Yeah, great result. I have the Foxes as being unchanged, despite who may or may not return to that match day squad. A lot of those problems are fairly long term. The Johnny Evans, the Ricardo Pereira. Pereira played in a behind closed doors game for the under 21s this week, come through that 70 minutes absolutely fine, so he could return to the squad. Johnny Evans, a little bit more of a risk with regards, had a couple of setbacks, that calf issue. So like I say, if it's not this week, then we're probably looking at game week 24. No mention last week or this week of the absence of Daniel Amartey, and we assume that it's injury related, but like I say, there is no official word on that. And Didi is absolutely fine. He returned from a hamstring problem, but missed out last weekend due to personal reasons.
And a lot of people in the comments are excited to see Faiz starting, Liverpool's top scorer for 2023. But in terms of it, we do have a question about Iheanacho. Giandre has said he's been great last week. Is it now his place to lose?
Yeah, there's, inherently we see Brendan Rodgers will just go with one striker. And for the most part, we've seen Patson Daka, Jamie Vardy rotated, flip-flop between the other. And Kelechi hasn't been great, but Brendan Rodgers did allude to some off-the-field issues that were maybe, hampering him or certainly, didn't help with regards to the situation. Now he seems to be, fully focused back in the team, performing. And, like we always say, if you've got the shirt, you earn the shirt and you're playing well, then it's yours to lose.
And we move to Liverpool there, as we're talking about Faiz. With the team there, that I think injuries are playing a bit of a part in the problems, but I think it's a personnel issue as well. The midfield just doesn't have the athleticism for the gegenpress anymore. But yeah, is there any positive news there? You've mentioned that Jota could be, Jota, we have to pronounce that correctly. We had a campaign a while ago to pronounce Jota correctly. I don't see him improving the team a whole lot, because it's that kind of getting the chances to those forward players. But maybe Klopp might experiment with that 4 that he did before when Jota was in the side.
I don't see it in the Merseyside derby, but maybe going forward, of course, Roberto Firmino isn't too far away, possibly outside chance for game week 24. He's ideal for just sitting in behind. Then you'd see more of a 4-2-3-1 from Liverpool. But in recent times, you see, he's adopted that 4-3-3 approach. The midfield is the conundrum. If Thiago does miss out, and like I say, up until this point, he hasn't trained since the defeat to Wolves. So we're playing the percentages. We have seen Carvalho started in the last Merseyside derby when Thiago missed out, but I think he's only had 3 Premier League starts since then. So highly unlikely that Jurgen Klopp brings him in. Jordan Henderson's also played on the left, which is why I have him there, and James Milner. Centrally, you've got Fabinho, but he's coming off the back of illness, and, by his own admission, his form hasn't been great. And also have Elliott back on the right-hand side in place of Naby Keita. Liverpool weren't great against Wolves, so that's why I've changed things up.
I think your microphone might have just cut out there, Ben. So I don't know if you need to give it a little fiddle for a second. Yeah, you've cut out. We can't hear you, Benny. So I'll just keep talking for a second, and hopefully you'll be back with us. Because
I'm back. It's the old mic problems. I did give it a hit before I came on the show, but obviously I didn't hit it hard enough.
It is back. So Manchester City. Now this was the one that we're debating about right at the start with the Arsenal situation. So people send in your questions about the double game week now, but yeah, it's kind of hard with the team that. It's both the problem of rotation, but also the fact that the team just aren't playing that well. Just to remind people, I did do a Patreon and I did do a shorts video on this as well, so you can check out on the channel on my Patreon. But part of the problem is Haaland. Just the way that he plays, he's such a classic kind of goal scorer, but he's not involved with the build-up play. He doesn't do the defensive work. He doesn't press all that much. And so the rest of the team has to adapt. And, people last week pointed this out, but this is the kind of formation that Pep is going for. But they're losing a player in the midfield. The kind of thing is Arsenal playing what Pep has done over the last few years with that kind of lovely overloads all over the pitch. Whereas because of Haaland just kind of being stuck up there, they're not getting those overloads over the pitch, and it's really affecting the defence of the team. If you look at the defence of last season to this one, they're conceding a lot more, but they're also conceding a lot of higher quality chances in terms of XG conceded. So, we can talk about the injuries here, with Phil Foden out and stuff like that, but it's also a kind of systemic and maybe a personnel issue as well. I think maybe Man City are kind of like Liverpool. They're doing a bit better this season, but they need to bring some people in as well, don't they, Ben?
Yeah, this has been a bit of a head scratcher, this downturn. And, it isn't massive, but of course, this is Manchester City, and even the slightest drop in performance, is flagged and highlighted by all and sundry. So the worry and the concern here for teams coming up against, City, they're a wounded animal. Following on the back of that defeat to Tottenham, you also got the financial fair play stuff going on, and that 100+ charges pending on the club. It's only going to galvanise them. They're going to want to go out and have a performance and throw some of those words back into the faces of those who've chosen to to write about them. Last week was a mistake, in my opinion, dropping the likes of Gundogan and of course Kevin De Bruyne. Pep maybe will reflect on that and think, maybe I shouldn't have done that in such a high profile big game. I'm not expecting for Pep to do that once again. He can get his big guns out, and like I say, I wouldn't put it past him to come out and put in 2 great performances and get 2 excellent victories under the belt.
This is the thing, they do have it within them, but I think some of the capabilities of expectations of Man City are built on the teams of a few years ago, or even last season. They absolutely dominated the kind of COVID ball, we should call it, that era during the pandemic. Pep masterminded it. He switched up the tactics. He got the best from his players, but maybe this might be one too far. I don't know. It's an interesting situation because we haven't kind of seen this with a Pep team ever, I don't think. The last year at Barcelona, a lot of players talked about fatigue, mental fatigue, physical fatigue, and maybe this is just the end of a cycle. These happen at clubs. And just kind of looking at the data, this is from my Patreon article of a couple of weeks ago, but Man City last season, 0.8 expected goals against per 90. This season, 1 expected goal against per 90, and also goals conceded last season was 0.68 per 90, and it's gone up to 1 per 90 as well. So it is a bit of a worrying situation. We shall see. Let's have a look though. So Jandre has said Ben must be feeling ill because you don't have Phil Foden in the team. I said it's because Phil Foden feels ill. But also, we've got a question. No Nathan Ake.
Correct. You look at that left-hand side and there's a rizzle of paper between a lot of those players. Again, it'll come down to maybe how players are feeling, how they've trained this week, what Pep feels in terms of maybe looking at that game midweek. So that's, they're going to have to weigh up those decisions. So I think if Laporte starts, at the weekend, I think he will change it up and bring Ake in for that midweek game. Like I say, I don't think there's a great deal of difference between a lot of those players. So it's a little bit of a coin toss.
So let's look at the red side of Manchester then. And it's probably a bit more settled there, kind of looking at the team. But you've got Dalot back in the back line. We've got Sabitzer in there because obviously with the situation of Eriksen and also Casemiro, it's more of a makeshift midfield, and maybe that's why we saw the score at Leeds as well, because Casemiro and Eriksen out of the team, it's going to affect Man United a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's potentially a few ways Erik ten Hag could have set up his team, but injuries and suspension and also a touch of illness mean that there isn't a lot of alternatives within this team. Of course, on the right-hand side, Dalot come in for Wan-Bissaka. He missed out because of illness. It's centre-back. Look, the likes of Harry Maguire and also Victor Lindelof could potentially come in. Fred wasn't great against Leeds, but when you factor in the loss of, like you said, the Casemiros, Scott McTominay, Donny van de Beek, Christian Eriksen, then he probably has to start unless Erik ten Hag wants to take a risk and maybe bring in a youth player or maybe even put a Victor Lindelof up there. I suppose the other considerations are, with Wout Weghorst, hasn't been great. It certainly isn't pulling up any trees. But who else do you stick up there? Is it a Marcus Rashford and bring in Garnacho on that left-hand side? Anthony's out. Jadon Sancho maybe ideally isn't 100% match ready. But on the back of his goal, I do have him in that starting 11 for that reason.
Yeah, some people are asking about Martial. Will he be back in the squad soon? Because what was the injury? Is kind of another one. Again, you did a great video on this. Was it 31st injury in however many years?
Yeah, it's actually his 5th time loss injury of the season since the opening weekend. I think 6th if you count that one that he picked up against Atletico, I think, on that final friendly of the summer. He's had Achilles problem, hamstring issues. This latest one is a hip problem. So what we do know is he certainly won't feature this weekend, and he won't feature in the Europa League against Barcelona on Thursday. It's one of those ones where, inherently, I think those decisions have been player-led. Martial has wanted to be involved. They've went with the player, but he keeps on suffering these, recurrences, reactions, and setbacks. Now it's about maybe taking the decision out of his hands, taking him out the firing line, and allowing that player to fully recover. So it might be a few weeks yet.
So we're going to move on to Newcastle, your boys. As we stated at the beginning, a lovely game against Bournemouth, a really nice one. But is there any injury news to kind of bring down the team or boost it? What is the latest?
Yeah, my initial thoughts were maybe Alexander Isak would come in on the left-hand side, or new signing Anthony Gordon. However, reading between the lines, and sort of Eddie Howe did hint or suggest that Alan Saint-Maxim would retain his place in that start 11. Wasn't great against West Ham. Cut a little bit of a forlorn figure, a bit frustrated. Crowd were getting on his back. But Eddie Howe said, that he believes that Maxi is the type of player that will thrive when he's got games in quick succession, when he's got that sharpness, that bit between his teeth. And that sort of leads me to believe that, the Frenchman will be given another opportunity. But like I say, Isak and Anthony Gordon are both breathing down his necks. Although, of course, Gordon certainly can play on the opposite flank where Mickey is at the moment.
And I think the thing is as well with Newcastle, they need a bit of confidence going forward. The great kind of first international break to pre-World Cup period, that kind of few game week 9 to 17 or 9 to 16.
16, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. You guys were on fire, but you kind of lost that confidence. Wilson is just not hitting the mark. And I think one thing that, was it with our discussion with Colin Lewin, some players are the players that you have to get the minutes in their legs, and then they start performing. It's not kind of protect them, give them gloves, not conservative yet. You have to be the opposite. It's kind of like Mo Salah gets his best output when he's played constantly, and that's why these players are never rested. Do you think that that's the thing with Callum Wilson is, it's going to take a little bit of time, but he'll be back soon enough?
I mean, he got the goal against West Ham and he had a fairly decent game, looked sharp. Probably could have done a little bit better with that header. in the second half that he put straight down the throat of Fabianski. So on another day, he could have walked away with 2 goals. I think that little bit of sharpness is gradually coming back. We know at this level, it's all about those fine margins. And probably by his own admission, I think it was 9 games Wilson went without a goal before ending that drought. But what motivation, or what more motivation would you need this weekend than going down and playing against your former club? I'm sure he would love a goal down at the Vitality. So yeah, that's why I have him as picked out both on my fantasy team on Fantasy 5 and also my FPL team as well.
I have to ask the question, how much would he love it?
You would love it. Loads and loads.
Nottingham Forest up next. I don't know if many people are invested in them, but what is the latest there?
Yeah, I've heard a few sort of comments and questions on my timeline with regards to Nico Williams on the right-hand side. Surprising that he came back into that starting 11 last weekend. Steve Cooper has went down the Aurier route. We'll see. Again, it's a bit of a coin toss. Elsewhere within the team, there isn't really too much up for debate. John Joe Shelby still isn't quite match ready following his move from Newcastle. That's been a calf problem. Surprised to see Morgan Gibbs-White, take those pre-match press conference quotes with Steve Cooper with a little bit of salt. Let's just say in the build-up to last weekend's game, what he said was, Gibbs-White, we don't have any kind of definitive timeline. He's still being assessed. He is a quick healer, but suffice to say, he is sidelined in the short term. Sure enough, team news comes out and he starts. So go figure.
I'm glad I'm still in the 11 as well, as left centre back. And we do have a question from Matty saying Newcastle defence around 6 mil next season. I mean, I reckon Trippier will be much more expensive than that. He's kind of a cheat code, isn't he? Each game week, getting a clean sheet and bonus points, and sometimes a goal involvement as well. Another team that I don't think many people are invested in, got too much interest in, but really quickly, Ben, Southampton's news?
Yeah, we'll wait and see how Nathan Jones lines up here. He spoke about, maybe making decisions based on those around him and the pressures of, the crowd and advice that he's taken. He said he's going to go back to his roots. He's going to go back to what he believes in. A couple of new signings, Unanuchu and Suleimana, spent more time in the passport and immigration office ahead of game week 22, but they have trained fully this week. So I have them in that starting 11. Be good to see them. They made a bit of an impact from the bench last time out.
I think the interesting thing maybe with Southampton is less on the pitch. It's more Nathan Jones's comments. He's cutting an interesting figure. I don't know if it's pressure getting to him already, but he has fascinating press conferences. He's already becoming a character in the Premier League, and I don't know if that speaks of more problems at the club. I don't know if you'd want to say anything on that, Ben.
Look, I think it's difficult, as you move up the leagues. There's more eyes, there's more exposure. People focus more on your comments. Look, it's difficult. Some of the pressure he brings on himself, but look, I could get myself in trouble. I know some of the guys down there, and some of the work that he's doing on the training pitches. Look, he is well respected. He tries to make it all inclusive. He does listen to the opinion of his players. Things are going quite well off the pitch, but ultimately you're going to be judged on results. And when you're not winning, is it 9 and 10 games have lost in the Premier League? When you're on a run like that and you're hovering precariously close to that drop zone, you're at real risk of being relegated, and you can't seem to turn those losses into draws and draws into wins. Then there are going to be people out there who are, ready to throw pelters. The best way you can answer them, like I say, is to go out and get 3 points.
There you go. We don't want you to get in trouble though, Ben. That wouldn't be very nice. Let's have a look at Tottenham's team. Jandre has said, weird to see Son as he's not really done anything this season at all. do you think he will move on? It's a good question with Son. Last season, outstanding. In fact, not just last season, the last few seasons, him and Kane have kind of held that team together. Now it's basically just Kane, and it must be extremely worrying for Tottenham fans going forward that there's so much reliance on Kane, not just for goals but also the creativity in the team. The kind of next couple is Perisic, who's getting old, and Kulusevski, who's not signed there permanently. There's a lot of worries over that team. But what is the injury situation there? Is there positives for Spurs?
I wouldn't necessarily say positives. I think from last weekend, there's a few negatives. Truth be told, we know that Hugo Lloris is ruled out for around about 6 weeks-ish. So Fraser Forster definitely starts. And Yves Bissouma, back up in midfield, has now been sidelined after undergoing surgery for a stress fracture in his ankle. So, that's not great with regards to that. On the positive side, Lucas Moura and also Pape Sarr, they're in and around the training pitches, so it'll be a case of just building up fitness with them. We do have one suspension, that's Christian Romero, so we have Davison Sanchez starting.
Interesting. And what's the latest with the new signing, Pedro Porro? Why is he not in the team? Is it purely tactical?
I just think, Emerson Royal didn't do too bad against Manchester City. You come away with a 1-0 win against the champions. Porro's opportunity will come. I just don't think it's this weekend.
It's an interesting one because, the whole thing about buying Pedro Porro was because they need this right back. They need this right back. And last season, they bought in Emerson. Was he Nuno Espirito Santo signing? I can't remember, but it was kind of, the insistence there, and then they haven't started him on the first game. But then, like you said there, maybe it's some things on the the pitch or whatever.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't have expected. I didn't have him to start in the first game. Let's not forget that the deadline was only on the Tuesday. So by the time you get your paperwork done, you do your travel, you do everything else. You're lucky if you've got a full session in with your new teammates. So there's still a way of understanding team philosophies, methodologies, the way he wants you to play, the physicalities, the demands, the intensity. It's going to be all new to him. So, look, if he doesn't start, in those first sort of few games, that wouldn't be any surprise to me. It's, I certainly see him as a longer term as we go deeper into the season and more towards that run-in where we'll see the best of Porro.
Just the way, the Tottenham fans were speaking, it was like they'd rather have nobody than Emerson Royal start. I don't know if they're putting a lot of their anguish on poor old Emerson Royal. West Ham, though, what is the situation there? I think the loss of Danny Ings is a big blow because goals have been their main problem this season. That they've remained fairly sturdy at the back. They just cannot hit the back of the net.
Yeah, I mean, Danny Ings could potentially start this weekend. He returned to the squad and actually got minutes against Newcastle at St James's Park. So he's had a good week on the training pitches. Gianluca Scamacca, not so good. Injections in his knee, hasn't maybe responded as hoped. The only real major update from last weekend was the absence of Kira. He was forced off at the break against Newcastle with a hamstring problem. That's why we have Ben Johnson coming in on the right-hand side of a three. Opportunities here for David Moyes to certainly change things up, Thomas Souček, and move to a more of a 4-2-3-1. But what he did, the Hammers boss allude to, he says he thinks that performance last weekend was probably the best of the season. So that's why inherently I've only went with those changes which are enforced with the rest remaining in place.
FPL Rubber Ducky says, quack quack everybody, the most useful FPL stream you can find. Very thankful for those kind words. And then Jandre has a question. He said, is Cresswell injured? Because if so, Emerson could be a bargain.
Cresswell is not injured. Aaron Cresswell is included in the matchday squad. This is purely a tactical decision. We've seen various sort of setups and formations from David Moyes, from that 4-2-3-1, where almost Aaron Cresswell was that set and forget in that left back role, and Emerson didn't really get much of a look in. But Cresswell hasn't his injury history, let's say it is a little bit checkered. And Emerson, he took a little bit of a while to find his feet down in that West Ham team. But like I say, when you're performing and you have the shirt, and you're playing, games every 5, 6, 7 days, so you have optimum levels of recovery, then you'll tend to see a more settled team. And like I say, particularly because I thought Newcastle were, as a Geordie, the way that game panned out, I was fairly happy with that 1-1 result in the end. I thought West Ham were really good.
Now we move on to the last team of this game week, Wolves. Colm has a good interest in the team. He said, I quite like the look of Sarr and Kilman, but I would like to hear the news on Neto.
Yeah, Neto probably shouldn't be too far away. But again, we're talking about a player who not only has had an extended period on the sidelines with his latest injury, but just prior to that, he had another lengthy spell out. So again, we're talking about a player who's been, severely hampered in recent weeks, but shouldn't be too far away from being in and around, that squad. But Lopetegui now he's brought in a few new players. There's lots of competition in there. We don't have Moutinho starting, who used to be a staple of that Wolves midfield now. And even if you look at the likes of Nathan Collins, who's been from the outside looking in, and from when I've seen him, appear to be a great player, great signing, looks solid. But Craig Dawson has come in, and off the back of that result against Liverpool again, without any of those enforced changes, I don't really see many changes in there, which will probably disappoint owners of Hugo Bueno on the left hand side, as I have Ait-Nouri starting in his place.
Well, this is the question. They have a question here from John Dre. He said, is Bueno still an option, or should we take the L and move on?
Look, he's still in and around that 3.9 million. So for me, he should remain in your squad on the understanding that, look, is he going to be starting week in and week out? Probably not. But like I say, he's still an option that potentially gets some points. So he enables you to spend elsewhere. But again, you get that shirt, you keep it. If they keep on beating teams like they did last week and keeping clean sheets, then I don't see much change in that back four.
Well, that is the end of this week's stream. We hope that everybody has found the information useful, and we wish you the best of luck. And just as always, you can check out my Patreon. I can quickly bring it up, actually. There's been a few topics here. So this one is on Man City, just misfiring Man City. Is it down to them? Is it down to tactics? Got some nice kind of graphics in there as well. But yeah, everybody, wishing you the best of luck, the best of health, and we will see you again very, very soon. If my mouse continues to work, it's not working, so I can't stop the stream. Got to keep talking. There you go. Now it's working.